This video is sponsored by Surfshark. About 16 months ago, I made the biggest mistake of my career. Bigger than that dreaded animated moments video and bigger than my Pokemon video. Those two were either naivety or lacking in clarity, but this one, I should have known better. You see, 16 months ago, I released a breakdown of the Moro character and the arc as a whole, before it finished. On top of being largely negative, I also got so much stuff wrong. So once I realized all of this, I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't talk about the Moro arc until it finished up completely. And while I was waiting in silence, you guys sent me thousands, and I mean thousands, of messages asking me to make a video on it, to rectify my mistakes and to own up to them. And so with this video, I'm not going to do just that. Today, I'm going to write to you all about why this is, for me, at this moment in time, the best Dragon Ball Super arc in the entire series. Today, I'm reviewing the very first manga original story entitled The Moro Arc. This year has been a roller coaster when it comes to content, with me exploring a brand new story in One Piece, and as a result, it's been literally 7 months since I've released or made anything Dragon Ball related, so I thought what better way to end the year than by returning to my roots in reviewing the latest from the world of Dragon Ball, and this one's rather special. The arc itself started in November of 2018, and to be perfectly honest, by the time this one rolled around, I was sort of apprehensive to say the least. Toyotaro's Tournament of Power didn't exactly set my world on fire, and with this new arc, to have the slate wiped completely clean once again with another story out of nowhere, with little connection to the prior, I was really starting to feel tired of the product overall, and thus were the feelings surrounding my time with the manga for the months and chapters that trickled on into 2019 and ultimately 2020, until I arrived today with this video for you to say that this story is honestly way better than I thought it was, and easily my favorite in Dragon Ball Super's catalog. And what's more is that it actually boasts a pretty simple story. Goku and Vegeta get recruited by the Galactic Patrol to stop some bad guys. We're introduced to the Galactic Patrol prison where all the worst people in the universe are kept, except for Freiza. It's here we also are introduced to Moro, and after escaping from prison, he defeats Goku and Vegeta on Namek, forcing them to do their own independent training while he becomes a more powerful, younger fighter. Culminating in a massive battle on Earth and with Earth, I swear it'll make sense later, until finally Goku and Vegeta, alongside the combined efforts of the planet's inhabitants, overpower and defeat Moro for good. It's a simple story, and honestly has some surprisingly good execution when you go back over it and read it all at once. Peppered throughout, there's plenty of interesting choices that honestly remedied many of the transgressions of the prior story arcs that more than anything else made this a joy to read through in comparison. This manga by Toyotaro has been in serialization since 2015, releasing one chapter every month since. However, starting with Battle of Gods through Universe 6, Goku Black, and even the Tournament of Power, Akira Toriyama has written the story for the series. And a successor, for lack of a better term, has assumed the responsibility of bringing Toriyama's vision to life in the illustration department. And his name is Toyotaro. I've spoken about him in a number of different videos, and if you're interested, you can check them out too. But to be brief, going into this new arc over 2 years ago, I was extremely nervous for what was to come. Not just because I had tremendous issues with Toyotaro's illustrations in the past, but also because the production of this arc would be unlike anything we've received in the past. It would be the first story in Dragon Ball Super with the most direct involvement from Toyotaro. And while this story had some minor issues here and there, I sincerely think this is the best story in Dragon Ball Super. So without delaying it any further, let's start at the very beginning and break down what I thought of it. The introduction. The intro to this arc isn't particularly flashy, but one aspect I did think it nailed is its build-up to the character of Moro. Starting with a cold open to recruit the likes of Vegeta and Goku by the new addition to the cast of this arc in Merus, we as viewers get to see flashbacks to 10 million years ago with the likes of the Lord of Lords battling with Moro, along with introducing us to the expanded world of the Galactic Patrol. In terms of world building, I loved this aspect of these introductory chapters as they further expand the scope of Universe itself. The new dynamics and explorations through the ranks and day-to-day tasks of the Galactic Patrol made for scenes I was quite excited to see more of, specifically those concerning JACO, because while reading One Piece over the last year, I also took the time to blitz through JACO's manga. And if you haven't seen it, it's honestly a delight. It's one of the more recent works from Akira Toriyama from a paneling and illustration point of view too. And thanks to that short story, I was able to really enjoy JACO a lot more as a character in this tale when I revisited it for this video specifically. And speaking of characters, a criticism I had right up until the death of Merus in the manga was that I really didn't feel connected to him as a character. However, now having gone back over everything, I can happily say that I was wrong. Not only does he get characterized with this interesting air of mystery surrounding his person early on, but he is all over this story. From the very first chapter, he is the inciting incident that sparks the activities and introduces the heroes to the rest of the main story's world. But more on Merus a little later. Needless to say, it's time to dive into some of the major conflicts of the arc as we follow Moro having escaped from prison with his eyes set on Namek. The Namek section. One of my larger criticisms of this series has been their implementation of the other characters like Piccolo, or perhaps more obviously, Vegeta. It feels, to me at least, that after having gone through all of Super, Toei, Akira Toriyama, and Toyotaro never really knew what to do with Vegeta's character itself, forcing him to relive these same tired routines we've seen plenty of in the original series. In one respect, I can understand why. From the very moment Vegeta was introduced up until the very end of the series in Dragon Ball Z, he was designed to fulfill a very specific purpose, to undergo a change arc, to cause conflict and tension within the story as a result of that growth, and to be honest, he was incredibly effective in that role. As someone who their favorite characters are from Dragon Ball Z, and I'd wager a sizable chunk of folks will choose Vegeta very, very early on. And it's easy to see why. But now that his character's initial purpose, for lack of a better term, has been satisfied, what now? Well, the obvious answer would be to give him a new goal, but that's easier said than done. You can't just give him anything to do. It needs to be rooted in his character, or more specifically, his history. Otherwise, it runs the risk of feeling extremely artificial, and that's the last thing you want with a character that feels so real. So at the very least, I can empathize with the struggles of the writing staff at Toei and Akira Toriyama at large. They've clearly been dealing with a lot. However, thankfully, this arc changed all of that, and not only gave Vegeta a brand new experience for us to see him deal with, but it was also rooted in his character's history. We've been there for all of Vegeta's transgressions after the events of the Saiyan saga. We know everything he got up to during that time period on Namek and thereafter. And so with now revisiting Namek for the very first time since becoming a more complete character, we not only see Vegeta feel shame for having committed the things he's done, not only act in a positive way to enact change, but to also without flinching accept and own up to his past, acknowledging that it's something he needs to atone for, leading to some of the most compelling motivations in all of Dragon Ball Super that I've seen, culminating in him diving in before Goku to save a small Namekian boy called Eska. We've seen the character of Vegeta accept love into his life before, to accept friendship, and to fight for those people time and time again. It doesn't need to be brought to the forefront like a pivotal moment for his character anymore. He's grown past it. And in this Moro arc, this scene with Vegeta interacting with the surviving Namekians, fighting on behalf of them, and losing, really felt like something that was destined to take place in the original series. Nothing about it felt artificial. It's easily one of my favorite aspects of the story, with these specific motivating factors being informed by the past and influencing the path Vegeta takes in this story. This desire to pay this debt he owes to this people, this noble act to him, is the very trait that leads him down the road to train with the Yardratians later on their behalf. This new maturity specifically makes him not only a stronger person mentally, but physically, as we soon will find out. It's also during this sequence we learn more about Moro as a character, but more specifically how he fights. And boy did this impress me in a major way. Ignoring the fact that his magic is visually stunning and unlike anything we've seen from Dragon Ball in the past, Moro's set of powers is the perfect remedy to one of the biggest issues I had with Dragon Ball and maybe even Shonen at large. What I am specifically talking about is something called power creep. You see, eventually after the Freeza saga, the strength of the character started to leave the realms of imagination and onto stages that literally encompass the worlds of gods fighting. Every subsequent challenge met by Goku and the gang as a result needed to be met by stronger and more imposing villains than they last encountered in order for it to be worthwhile. It's one of the weakest aspects of long-running shonen. If it's not planned in advance, it can seem contrived that there's always someone randomly stronger to fight against, and that can get tiring as it usually results in Goku needing to punch him hard to fix fix it. Which this Moro arc has a lot of, but what makes it different is that unlike the prior arcs where Goku and Vegeta's strength make it remarkably unbelievable that they could ever find someone to challenge their godly powers, it's that very energy, that strength they've cultivated to make Moro so dangerous because just by being around him, he absorbs their strength, turning what was a glaring weakness of the series into a strength for the villain. And I thought that was brilliant, leaving Goku and Vegeta totally and completely drained of energy on their first outing, on the verge of death, leaving Moro to wreak havoc on the rest of the Namekian people as they recover. Building him up as this imposing monster of a foe, complete with a fresh new design unlike anything in the series. No transformations here, folks, just tons of visual indicators that this Eater of Worlds, Moro, is reaching a new level of strength with each passing second. Forcing Goku and Vegeta to retreat, they lost. And now, they need to do something about it. The training arc. Having spent most of this year covering a story that didn't have a focus on training in general, I sincerely found it refreshing watching Goku and Vegeta lick their wounds after the events of Namek and go on their own separate ways to train. For me, these training arcs, while offering some nice training sequences, demonstrate the growth of each character. I think by far and away the most interesting of these has to be Vegeta's training on Yardrat. On top of visiting a location we've only ever heard of in the original series, seeing the place felt equal parts new and nostalgic, like it really belonged there, which is not something I can say for everything in Dragon Ball Super these days. While this training is taking place, however, another parallel storyline concerning Moro and a secret wish arises, and this becomes the talk of the online community for months. You see, in the closing moments of the Namek section, Moro manages to get his hands on not only all of the Dragon Balls, but he manages to get his wishes for said balls on Namek. This personally I thought was exceptionally interesting, as to my recollection I hadn't ever seen a scene like this before in the series. And what's more is, Toyotaro decided to dangle Moro's final wish like a carrot in front of us by keeping it secret. Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, and YouTube were set ablaze. Theories were firing left, right, and center. It was so cool watching the fandom speculate over something so vigorously regarding Dragon Ball. I mean, the possibilities seemed endless, and then it was revealed that the surprise was, well, he wished for the prisoners to be released from the galactic prison. Woo! Some fodder for the secondary characters, or at least that's what I thought. And just like that, all these months of speculation went down the drain. It was disappointing.
Why are you the way that you are?
But you know what's funny? Going back over this arc all at once, this didn't bother me nearly as much, which brought something interesting to my attention. This story is remarkably simple, but it felt really long. At 25 chapters, if you include the ending chapter of the Universe Survival arc featuring Merus, despite being the 5th story arc covered in the Dragon Ball Super manga, it accounts for over 37% of the total chapters in all of the series. Now, that's not to say 25 chapters itself is long. I mean, please, I've read about 1,000 chapters of One Piece this year. But what made this story feel long and at times strange to follow was its release and production schedule. You see, with the classic Dragon Ball manga by Akira Toriyama in the 80s and 90s, readers in Japan got to experience the story not once a month, but every single week. With the chapters being shorter, the story as a result had to be structured such that every 11 or so pages, there would be a cliffhanger to end that week's release chapter. This is in part why I believe Dragon Ball Z was so infectious and so well paced in the manga. Not the anime. A chapter would be released every single week, creating routine, and for those binging it, every 11 pages there would be something to encourage them to read on. If you've ever held a Dragon Ball manga in your hand, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Open a random page and you'll get sucked in immediately. The thing's infectious. So, what does this have to do with the Moro Arc of Super? Well, in classic Dragon Ball, 25 chapters would usually translate to about 5.5 months worth of content. In Super, it translated to over 2 years. And when you get a cliffhanger once every month, if the particular chapter is uneventful, which some of them genuinely are, it makes it so easy to forget about this series and the specific events therein. If something bugs you about this story, you now have a month to be bothered by it. Whereas had it a more regular release schedule, the weaker chapters wouldn't hang around very long long anyway. Speaking from my own personal experience, there have been months where I genuinely forgot the manga was being released. Had I not had Twitter for you guys to remind me, I legitimately would have been months behind at this point. It's a small criticism, and maybe I'm nitpicking, but from a scheduled release standpoint, I sincerely don't believe enough story gets covered in the manga month to month to warrant this sort of release schedule. Comparing it to series like Attack on Titan that releases monthly also, the difference in how much story is covered per monthly chapter is honestly staggering. And so, given all of that, my first negative critique of this arc actually has nothing to do with the story, but in fact its serialization release schedule. And as a result, that one secret wish Moro made, while it was a blip in the overall story being told, it was at the forefront of fans' minds for literally months, allowing them to build false anticipation. Had this been released weekly like the classic Dragon Ball, audience expectations could have been managed much more efficiently, and going back over this series, this moment comes and goes so fast, it honestly doesn't even feel like it's worth talking about. But I digress. I want to thank Surfshark VPN for sponsoring today's video. In the ocean of online content, there's a lot of websites that take your info without you even knowing it, but you can swim under their radar using Surfshark VPN. With this particular service, you can stop websites from tracking your info and selling targeted ads to you online, completely protecting your privacy. Nothing is creepier than when you have a conversation with a friend about something and it pops up in your ads. Plus, with Surfshark Hardlock ID protection, you'll even get an alert when some rando jerk is trying to break into your email. But one of my personal favorite features of Surfshark is that you can see content that's not available in your area. For instance, did you know that right now on Netflix you can have the first 130 episodes of One Piece? Well, if you live in a country where that's not available, you can just log in with Surfshark and you can get access to that or any other show or film that isn't normally available for you. So, if you want both freedom and protection online, click the link in the description and use code TNM. It not only gives you a whopping 84% off the regular price, but also 4 months of service totally for free. Surfshark also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk to even try it out for yourself. So if this service sounds interesting to you or you want to support the channel, please check it out. Now, back to the video.
Ah! It's Big Green!
Let that child alone.
When it came to this section of the story, something that immediately stood out to me while I was reading month to month was that finally we were getting multiple points of view rather than following the same isolated linear path for the entire tale. If you cast your minds back to the Namek and Freeza sagas of Dragon Ball Z, for example, the point of view wouldn't stay on Gohan and Krillin ducking and dodging the Frieza Force the entire time. We got Goku training, King Kai's planet, Vegeta's perspective, and not to mention Frieza's among many others dotted throughout. This is something that adds richness to the world and, most importantly, keeps pivotal plot points interesting. If you spend too much time somewhere, then it starts to get boring. This was something Super struggled a lot with, in my opinion, but this arc breaks that trend and successfully establishes and utilizes multiple different scenes running parallel to one another. We got Goku training with Merus that, while brief, at least establishes a nice relationship between the two. We have Vegeta training on Yardrat, attempting to cast his pride to the side to repay a debt in learning a new strange technique. This scene in particular acts as a mystery box for Earth, and in addition to those two scenes, we have the point of view of the gods with Whis, Beerus, and the Grand Priest. But perhaps most compelling of all, we have a massive conflict brewing down on Earth as Moro begins to move in with his henchmen. The battle for Earth. It's at this point in the story my excitement was honestly building quite substantially. I recognized how interesting Moro was as a character in helping remedy the power creep issue, and I also noticed the concurrent storylines running all together. Knowing full well that they would all converge on the battle for Earth eventually, I was really excited to see how things would unfold as the two strongest in the universe, Vegeta and Goku, eventually finish up their training and make their respective saves. But the question was, to me at least, between Goku and Vegeta, who would make the save on who? And to my surprise, as the Z Fighters were defending the Earth, Goku arrives first, leading myself and many others to be excited in seeing Vegeta eventually making the save on Goku. This was, again, something we weren't too used to seeing from Vegeta, and to say we were all anticipating it was an understatement. Once again, this was a situation where the entire community was talking about it. Finally, Goku would be saved by Vegeta. Prior to this, much of the time on Earth had been spent with the likes of Gohan, Piccolo, and the androids, as they overcome the interesting and bizarre henchmen of Moro, establishing for us a pecking order and the means with which Moro has been harvesting energy across the universe. However, once they realize that they've vastly underestimated the forces of Earth, more and more fighters start to pour in, leading to them eventually being overwhelmed until Goku shows up to save the day. And save the day he most certainly does, taking out the individuals that have been causing the most trouble quickly, eventually coming face to face with the Goat Man himself, Moro. For me, the interest behind this particular fight stemmed from the prior battle where Goku was, well, he was dominated. On top of that, we know full well that Moro has become even more powerful since, but perhaps at the forefront of everyone's minds at this point would be the fact that Goku has been training with Merus, who has revealed himself to be an angel in training. And together their training consisted of Merus trying to acclimatize Goku to use Ultra Instinct on command. And while they found some success, the form was still unrefined, only managing to reach Ultra Instinct's sign. However, now he can control it. So that's something, at least. Looking more abstractly for a second, there are a variety of elements that make up this story taken from various parts of the original Dragon Ball storyline. Moro's search for power and youth bears striking similarities to King Piccolo's saga. The dynamic this Ultra Instinct sign introduces in this specific battle is very similar to that of the Kaioken technique used during the Freeza saga. Goku isn't going all out at first, but even after he does, it's still not enough, and all the while it drains him of his energy and stamina. And perhaps my favorite similarity of this story comes by way of a role reversal, which, in all honesty, is fitting considering this journey Vegeta has specifically undergone in this arc. After having spent quite some time training alongside the likes of the Ardradians, Vegeta arrives using a signature technique of his rival at the last second to make the save on a downed Goku after his initial fight with Moro. And it's thematically fitting too. This arc has made it its mission to drive home the fact that Vegeta is a different person now and regrets having committed the atrocities he did on Namek way back when. Those events and choices he made on Namek led him to where he was before Freiza. Beaten, defeated, and crying. All the while, Goku shows up to make the save at the very last second. However, now, things are different. Armed with a new technique and a virtuous motivation, Vegeta has not only told us through context clues and dialogue, but in a very real way has shown us by reversing his position in this very instance. He is no longer the one being saved, he is the one that arrives to save the day. This is one of my favorite moments, not just in this arc, but honestly, the series. It's a great moment for Vegeta. Unfortunately, this greatness is short-lived as it's quickly followed by some of the most ham-fisted dialogue I've ever seen in Dragon Ball. There's this sequence where Piccolo turns into a YouTube video essay channel and begins deconstructing Goku's character, telling us what he means to people and what he's done for them. Within the confines of a story, this doesn't need to be spelled out to the audience. Something like this feels right when it's unspoken, but when it's spoken, it feels like he's winking at the camera. Everyone knows what he means to the rest of the cast, and so should Goku. But in this scene, stupid Super Goku makes his return and blissfully nods along before acknowledging that he has no idea what Piccolo was even talking about. In addition to that, Piccolo also makes note that Vegeta isn't one to underestimate his opponent.
Why are you the way that you are?
This, in addition to a couple of other minor plot contrivances, make up the low point of this arc for me. If this arc ever gets adapted into an anime, please, for the love of all that is holy, please remove these ridiculous sections. Sidestepping those bad bits for now, let's talk visuals, because there are some genuine improvements from the older arcs. Now, as many of you know, I have not been the biggest fan of Toyotaro's paneling. I think oftentimes he relies too much on large numbers of panels, too many speed lines, and takes an approach to depicting his stories that more closely resembles a storyboard for an anime than an actual manga making full use of its medium. And despite much of what I've just spoken about being present in the latest material, I am not afraid to say that I've seen some marked improvements that I enjoyed too. From some really wonderful full and double page spreads, a less cluttered approach to his paneling in places, and an abundance of gestural drawings for the various characters in battle.
Oh my god, look, Goku's got nostrils.
It really helped to bring this story to life for me, and in ways prior arcs under his control had not. In other words, from a visual point of view, this manga is trending up in a direction I think is favorable for the series at large, and that makes me happy. Oddly enough, however, while I appreciate the significance that this new move Vegeta brings to the table from a lore standpoint, I think visually it looks extremely unimpressive. This normally wouldn't bother me too much, but we're talking about Dragon Ball here, the show that popularized the Kamehameha, Masenko, Kamehameha, Makanko Sappo, Kamehameha, and countless other important and visually interesting techniques. However, Force Spirit Fission, as it's called, really looks boring, which honestly I think is a shame. This move I can see being a massively important component to later arcs in the series too, so it sucks that it's not cool to look at least not for me. And finally, an aspect I really didn't like from a visual standpoint was the final powerful form Moro takes in response to Vegeta and Goku's efforts on him. Having sealed away his power in another interesting being called 7-3, Moro literally eats him, regains all of his lost power that was taken by Vegeta's Force Spirit Fission, and he just looks like a weird version of Cell now. While I didn't think the goat form of Moro looked particularly Dragon Ball, I at least thought it looked distinct. In that form, Moro had his own identity, but this version of him just looks like that homework you copied from a friend right before class started. You know what I'm talking about. You change it just enough so that it doesn't look like you completely copied the guy. So yeah, visually I'm not a huge fan of this. But despite this, however, what this means in terms of the narrative is clear. Moro is back to full power and Vegeta and Goku are spent, forcing Merus to break the rules of the angels, helping in an effort against Moro, damaging him permanently before vanishing completely into thin air. The character of Merus is honestly one I adored in this story. The idea of an immortal being, an angel in training, grappling with the morality and ethics of his individual situation, not knowing whether or not what he has been told to do is just. Forced to make this difficult decision, he chooses to do what he perceives to be the right thing, despite death being the consequence. It's a touching moment and one that is made much more powerful if you go back and read it all in one go. Month to month, I totally forgot so much about Merus as a character, and when I went back the second time, it was so much better. I might sound also like I'm harping on about different character moments here and there, but honestly, this arc is filled with them. Immediately after this, Goku rallies himself from the ground, fueled with motivation after Merus passes on, and has a really nice interaction right before his fight with Moro, as he speaks with JACO, asking him why he joined the Galactic Patrol. And it's quiet moments like these that really added so much more flavor and texture to the story. Again, something that the other arcs of Super lacked in my opinion. What follows this, however, is a really nice beatdown at the hands of Goku wielding the full power of Ultra Instinct. Once again, there's some really nice artwork on display, and in addition to there being some interesting back and forths, including an unfortunate Cell Saga callback regarding a Senzu Bean and a downed Moro, the best part of the final act for me is the cooperation between Vegeta and Goku. There's some crazy stuff like Moro turning into the Earth and Goku attaining the Avatar state, which, okay, I get it. Sounds like it's coming out of nowhere and is kind of silly, and okay, it's kind of silly, but it definitely doesn't come out of nowhere. This is actually a really subtle callback to something that happened way back towards the beginning of the arc itself by the Yardratian Elder. In this brief section, he discusses how it's a link or harmony between your body and spirit, and if that's not enough, during that very section too, he fools Vegeta into thinking himself to be massive, when in actuality he's not. And given that Ultra Instinct satisfied all of those parameters, it stands to reason that Goku would be able to use it too, specifically because he must have been made aware of the technique as he already spent a lot of time on Yardrat. And so something that was thought to be silly actually turns out to be a really nice callback that completely took me by surprise. So much so that I actually completely forgot about it when I was reading month to month. But again, when I was reading it straightforward, start to finish, binging it, it made so much more sense. Culminating with Vegeta helping Goku form a spirit bomb fueled by the most unlikely of characters, adding even further build up to a moment we all know is coming in the future with Oob. Overall, loved this decision personally. The last chapter. The last chapter of the Moro Arc provided for me something I've been waiting for since the original Dragon Ball story ended after the Buu Saga. Something that the Super Series has been sorely lacking has been finally addressed. A cohesiveness that was present in all of the original material that allowed it to feel like one massive story rather than individual smaller segmented ones is now present in Super in some regard. You see, in Z, Raditz flowed naturally into the Vegeta fight, which flowed again naturally into the Freeza fight, and so on. In Super, the Battle of Gods story has nothing to do with the Resurrection F material, which has nothing to do with the Universe 6 stuff, and for the future Trunks saga. There has been a massive void from the storytelling department present since the series rebirth back in 2015, and now, for the first time in the revamp, I can say categorically that this one flows into the next story, making it instantly more interesting in ways that I can't even begin to comprehend alone in this one paragraph. There's even a scene that gives actual consequences to the actions of the prior chapters. Merus gave himself up and in the process vanished. A quick fix for this usually would have been the Dragon Balls or for the gods fixing this, and while he is brought back, he lost his angel abilities and is now mortal. That's a large consequence for that character, and while not massive compared to the other stories, it is at least for Dragon Ball significant. I am more than ready to launch into this next story of the Dragon Ball series with Toyotaro at the helm now, and I'm excited to see this new wonderful character being introduced. This granola character sports a really nice design. I love the hair and the artificial body attachments, and beyond anything else, I love that he has a vested interest in the recovery of 7-3 after his battle on Earth. It's connected, it makes sense, and it's compelling. It's all very exciting, and I'm so interested to see what more is to come. And despite coming away from certain chapters disliking what I perceive to be cheap callbacks and unoriginal takes on a tenuous story at best, upon rereading the arc for the sake of this video, I was so surprised to see how little those negative nuggets mattered when I could immediately venture forth onto the next chapter. Taking instances like Moro looking to get young again feeling like King Piccolo, or Goku giving Moro a senzu bean feeling like the Cell games, when I finished reading this story I was able to put those isolated instances to the side and enjoy the story for what it was. Last year, I wrote a review I am honestly embarrassed by, and I hope that this review at least helps to right that wrong. The Moro Arc, while there are hiccups here and there, is easily the best arc penned by Toyotaro to date, implementing narrative choices I've been waiting literal years for. And now that we've gotten a glimpse of this new strikingly modern Toriyama design for granola, it's clear to see that Dragon Ball Super has potentially a very bright future ahead of it if they can keep this standard up beyond the currently discussed stories. I love Dragon Ball, I always will, and I can't wait to see what the series has to offer in the future. But until then, I've been Totally Not Mark. I'll see you all in the new year, and thank you all so much for watching.